Welcome back to my channel, JDJ Planet, and to my podcast, God is an Artist. I tried to film this a couple days ago, but then I realized, well, one, the Samsung Galaxy software updated and the filters are gone. And I used the filters to try to make the color match reality. By the time you see this, I'll be able to hopefully be able to edit it to make it match reality so it looks right. But yeah, and so it was kind of disappointing to know that, large corporations can control our devices to the point where entire options that we rely on are now gone. But anyway, and then when I actually did film, I put on my story that the mic was dead, but it wasn't dead. It was on mute. Right? It's not on mute now. I don't think. I don't think it's on mute now. So, yeah, I took some time off from the podcast, from filming the podcast, to focus on Schools Out Youth Celebration. And it really was a success. It was such a success. The young people came out, had a lot of fun, did some crafts, did some karaoke, had a lot of fun with our personnel, our staff, our de-escalation. They did water balloon fights, and it was a really, really fun and safe event. Safety among the young people is a really big thing right now. There happen to be a lot of events where young people are meeting to brawl, they're bringing weapons, and it's just an honor to know that Ferguson was able to put on a youth event filled with love, filled with vibes, and filled with safety. So I'm going to have drone footage of that event soon, so that way you all can see exactly what I'm talking about. The Creative Spot is now its own nonprofit organization. So that means the Giving Art campaign is still going on, but it's moved from Give Butter under a red circle to Zeffy with the Creative Spot's own, information and whatnot. So we're still accepting donations to help spread art, to help spread love. The Creative Spot is all about providing creative connections, creative solutions, creative community, and creative wellness through creative placemaking at the Creative Spot. One of the projects that we had at the event were the fluffy flowers, like as you can see on my table. And we also had hydro dipping and we had painting, and a lot of people enjoyed themselves. I had families, whole families come and make hydro dipping activities, hydro dipping crafts projects. I had two brothers come. One brother, he wanted to do a half and half, and then his brother was like, I want to do it half and half too. And I'm like, yeah, that's your little brother. You're his role model. He wants to do what you're doing. And it's just, to be able to give those kind of fun family vibes to the community is a great, great honor. Shout out to all the groups that collaborated: Ferguson Youth Initiative, Ferguson Police Department, Gamers Island, Ferguson Special Business District, Boys and Girls Club of Greater St. Louis, and all of the other groups that poured into this amazing event. It really showed that collaboration, when done well and when done right, it produces amazing results. And, we're in this season right now. The community is in this season where we're just kind of tired, we're just kind of tired of things kind of being at a standstill. We're tired of things not really improving in the ways that we thought that it would. And we're switching to a village mentality right now. We're not trying to make giant names for ourselves. We're not in this thing for personal gain and for our own selfish ambitions, but we're in this thing to really help the community get better and to really create a community that the young people can inherit. And honestly, it's an honor because our parents are doing their best to be productive adults. They're probably working 9 to 5s, full shifts. They're probably also trying to start their own businesses, and they're doing everything that they can to give their child the life that they deserve. And sometimes they're exhausted. They can be overwhelmed. Like right now, our house, our AC is not working. I had Gold Camp come out. Shout out to the Florissant Group for recommending them. The man who came in, the technician, he was very professional and quick in and out. He just came and took a look at the unit. Hopefully, he's able to find the part that he discovered was missing. so he can come back and put the AC back together. But like our parents, we're going through stuff, regular old stuff. Like I got my little setup here, with the table and the podcast, and this is about all you can see. But like my own personal parental struggle right now is keeping up with laundry, and keeping up with my kids' diet because they're picky. My kids are picky, and I think by the time Omar is old enough to have full blown meals, he won't be as picky. But like the other two, they'll ask me for something, I'll give it to them, and they don't want it. And I'm just like, what am I gonna do? And I'm not really like really big on forcing them to eat stuff. Try not to be anyway, although all the wasting, I'm really trying to figure out what my next step is because I want them to eat and I don't want to keep putting food in the trash. So it's just like, parents have struggles. And then aside from parental struggles, there might be, vocational struggles at work, their own families, their own friends, and it can be overwhelming. That's where the community steps in. The community steps in to provide that kind of support so their kids can have a safe and fun third place that they can go to get the enrichment that they need, to get the interaction that they need, and the engagement that they need. Speaking of engagement, this is my engagement ring. Bizarrely, my wedding ring went missing, and I'm really sad about it, honestly. I'm trying to be a good sport. Right now I'm in a season where I'm not gonna allow life to really keep me down too long and be in this prolonged negative state. But like, that was the ring that I got married with, and I looked on my finger. I went to twiddle it. I usually just twiddle it. It's like a little habit that I have, and it wasn't there. And I'm just like, what? Where did my ring go? And I had it yesterday morning, and I was at the creative spot working, and that's when I realized I didn't have it. And so hopefully it comes up somewhere. And if anybody finds the ring, hopefully you want to be like, hey, I found a ring. Is this anybody's ring? Or, you bless somebody else with it at this point. I guess we're at a stage where we can upgrade our hardware, our marriage hardware. But the engagement ring is still very pretty, and I enjoy it. But anyway, we're talking about parenthood. We're talking about how did God design parenthood, and I believe God designed parenthood to be authoritative, because God is a cause and effect God. God is not an author of confusion. He's not a God of confusion, but he's a God of order. And so in today's episode, in today's video, I keep thinking they're crying, but they're not. In today's video, we're going to talk about the rod, and we're going to talk about whether it's figurative. It's a figurative command to hit your child, or is it a literal command to hit your child? And some would say it's literal. I personally think it's figurative, but I went into YouTube. I'm open to being corrected, and I'm open to changing my mind about it because I want to do right by my kids, and I want to train them up in the way that they must go so that they won't depart from it. But at the same time, these videos, and I watched three of them. And I probably want to do a little bit more research just so I can continue to solidify my thought process and my morals as a parent. But all three of these videos pretty much said the following. So spanking is biblical. The passage from Proverbs commands us to literally strike our children as punishment. Do so on the bottom so that the pain inflicted doesn't leave any marks or bruises. Explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. Check your spirit. Make sure you're not doing it out of anger. Keep a right heart posture and comfort the child as to restore the relationship back to health, not letting anger and frustration fester in the child, right? So that's pretty much like the overall idea that I got from those three videos, how they were trying to claim that spanking is biblical. But one of the things that I took issue with this idea is the fact that none of these videos took into account child development and how the brain develops. And if we're going to consider God our artist, if we're going to consider God our designer, our creator, our maker, our orchestrator, our author, then we cannot negate brain development and how the brain develops in our childhoods. I believe, when it comes to people who have degrees in psychology and in neurology and behavior experts and childhood development experts, I think God blesses these people with the ability to understand his design, decipher his design, and translate that understanding to the rest of us. The human brain is designed to achieve survival. It's designed to sustain itself, to sustain the body, right? And when the body endures pain, and really on any level, there's a chemical reaction in your mind. I gotta find something that actually gives the specific happening that happens in the brain. But trauma isn't always caused by a major event. For instance, my daughter, when she was about 1.5, 2 years old, the windshield wipers on the car had made this really bad screech sound. And it was the first time she had ever seen windshield wipers. In that moment, it terrified her. She was scared. And so now, even all these years later, when the windshield wipers come on, she's frightened and she covers her eyes as if to flee, right? As if to initiate her flight response to that noise. And so trauma responses and trauma behaviors all fall under 4 categories. Some people say 6, but for this video, I'm just going to talk about 4 really quick: fight, flight, / flee, freeze, and fawn. And so, when we whoop our kids, when we spank our kids, especially if you're not doing it, if you're going to whoop your kids, this is the way I guess you should do it. But, when you're not checking your spirit, when you're not comforting them afterwards, when you're doing it out of anger, then we could very well produce people pleasers, which is under fawning, people who zone out, which is under freezing, people who lie, which is under flight, and people who are combative, and people who have, I guess, quote unquote, attitude problems. That would be under fight. And so eventually I'm going to get really deep into the whole fight, flight, freeze, fawn thing whenever I get into more about mental health and mental processes. But like, God is an artist, and the brain is complex. It's a very complex organ. And understanding it takes divine revelation, and it takes education. And so, I think it's important that when we're talking about parenthood, we're talking about, training your child up in the way that they must go. And when we consider, fathers don't exasperate your children, fathers don't provoke your children to anger, then we should consider brain development. I'm going to go through some of these verses that are used to claim or support the claim that whooping your children, smacking your children literally is biblical. And so right now, let's look at Proverbs 13 and 24. And I wrote these down based off of the Bible here. I looked at the Bible to write down what's in my journal. So it says, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. And then Proverbs 22 and 15 says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. And then Proverbs 23, 13 and 14, probably the main passage that they use to justify spanking children. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. And then Proverbs 29 and 15 says, a rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces its mother. These are the 4 verses that people who are pro spanking and pro whooping will probably turn to justify their actions as a believing parent in the kingdom of God. The reason why I think it's figurative is because if you look, there's a couple of verses, two verses in the Bible that I found that would suggest that the rod is not meant to strike your children, literally, right? So Psalm 23:4 says, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for your rod and staff, they comfort me." Right? I think the rod is meant to be something of guidance, right? Shepherds, when they're guiding their sheep, they'll take a rod, right? And then they'll kind of like, scoot your sheep in the right direction, right? You get the one that goes off, you're not going to go and beat that sheep, right? You're going to go and direct that sheep back to the herd. And then another verse that I didn't write down that I'm going to open up to the Bible to find is in Isaiah 11:4. And I'm going to start in the middle of verse 3, so I'm reading an entire sentence. "So he will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy, with justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked." Right? And so this verse suggests that the rod is coming from his mouth. What if the rod is not like a literal weapon to literally strike and cause pain to your child's body, but what if the rod is similar to like a drill sergeant drilling into their cadets, drilling into their soldiers, the orders and the commands, right? You've seen those people, they're right up in their face, they're sternly talking to them, right? Shouting even to get a point across. And when it comes to, speaking of discipline in the army, my dad, he was in the army, and when he was out there in the barracks, they would have to clean the entire cabin, the entire barrack from top to bottom, leave nothing behind, right? And when the general drill sergeant person would come in, and he would have on like a white glove, and he would swipe like a bed or like a windowsill or something. And if there was anything left behind, then he would make them do it all over again, right? Talk about discipline. You're not hitting your child, you're not beating your child. You are disciplining them, like today and yesterday. I'll talk about yesterday. So my son, he likes to climb in the bunk bed in his room. Right now it's like a giant crib set up, and so he was climbing on it, and I was telling him to get down, using my stern voice and whatnot, and he was just kind of laughing at me like I was a joke. And that's the time where you would spank your kid, right? That's the time where you would whoop your kid, and someone might be pro whooping in that kind of mode, right? Your kid is not laying down when they're supposed to, you might hit them with something. But like, since I'm trying to avoid that, I decided to just swaddle him up in a giant blanket like he was a baby, and he slept fine. The only thing, since our AC doesn't work, he was getting hot in the blanket and he was sweating. But like, once the AC is back up and running, I will be utilizing that method to keep him from climbing all over the bed. And then today he spilled a thing of goldfish crackers, and once again, it's probably one of those moments where you would spank your child, pop your child, whoop your child for doing something that they shouldn't be doing. But instead, I made him clean it up. And I forced him to clean it up. Like, I took his hand and I had him pick up the goldfish, and he was not happy. He was not comfortable. He was pretty he was pretty hysterical about it. But like, you make a mess in this house, you need to clean up after yourself. Eventually I'm gonna get Nayeli her own broom and dustpan. She's kind of like a mini me right now. If I tell Ezra to stop, she'll tell him to stop too. If he makes a mess, she'll yell at him. I'm trying to get her out of that, but I know she's just following my example. But yeah, like, another example of, natural consequences. Once I gave Nayeli some food, and it was too hot for her, and it burned her, and she started crying. I didn't mean to do that. But now, when I say the word hot, no, she knows. She knows. I think that the rod, as it pertains to God's design for parenthood, and if God designed parenthood to be authoritative, if God designed parenthood to be orchestrative, right? Very much how he parents us, right? If we disobey God, he won't like send lightning down on us. He will let our disobedience ruin us. Like I mentioned in a previous video, if you want to rebel against God's commands, and if you don't want to do what God told you to do, he's just going to let you ruin yourself. Very much like the prodigal son story, where that young man, he wasn't supposed to squander his wealth like that. He wasn't supposed to take his inheritance early and go out and do that. And so instead of like sending, an army after his son and then, reprimanding him, the son had to come to grips on his own and say, you know what, I shouldn't be doing this. I need to go back to my father's house. And then when he went back to his father's house, his father celebrated him. His father threw him a feast. And, the older son, he was like, what about me? Why didn't I get a feast and whatnot? But like that story is to illustrate how God is redemptive and how he celebrates redemption that happens on our own accord. I'm really passionate about this because as we talk about the young people and we talk about what they need and what they don't need and what they're missing and how they're spoiled, and when we're talking about this and that, we need to somehow make the conversation about mental development, mental wellness, emotional wellness. How are they getting their emotional intelligence? How are they learning how to express themselves? Are they learning about emotions? Are they learning about mental mindsets? Are they learning about anger? Are they learning about cortisol and adrenaline? Are they learning about, trauma? Are they learning about how the brain functions, right? And at home, are they getting the emotional support that their parents need? Are the parents getting the emotional support that they need? And so I think it's important, as we're exploring God's design for parenting and ultimately God's design for like childhood and for child development, we have to think deeper than, oh, my mom did it, so I'm going to do it. Oh, my dad did it, so I'm going to do it. But like, why are they doing it? I'll talk about myself for a second. When I became an adult, I was having a hard time disagreeing when I should disagree. I was having a hard time saying no. I was like a really yes person, really easy to get along with, really agreeable, but like I felt invisible. I felt like I had disappeared. And, trying to avoid conflict. I'm not confrontational at all. I have a hard time still, if something is bothering me or if a person is bothering me, I have a hard time expressing that. And I was wondering why. Like as an adult, you would think that by the time you turn a certain age, your brain would just snap out of it and you'll be able to express yourself. You'll be able to speak your mind. You'll be able to do it. But like I decided to do like a bit of research, like, I wonder if people pleasing is a trauma response. Like, I wonder if I had endured some sort of trauma to make me like this. And sure enough, spankings and whoopings, they condition children to be everything the adult wants them to be, right? Of course, you're going to get the good grades. Of course, you're going to be on your best behavior because you're afraid. You're scared. You're scared of what could happen to you if you're not on your best behavior. And you're scared of what could happen to you if you don't get the grades, right? Versus, letting a kid kind of bump their head a couple times on their own, right? And so, that's really what made me want to become a gentle parent. That, and I saw a creator on TikTok. She was basically like, yeah, I was gentle parented before it was even called that. And I noticed I have more patience with life. I have more confidence in life. And I think better. My mind is at ease. And I don't feel so frantic about life. And honestly, when you think about it, it makes sense because whoopings and spankings, they produce fear in children. That's basically the whole idea behind whooping your kid, right? Is to instill fear into them. So that way they are afraid of doing the wrong thing, right? Which, in theory makes sense, right? Don't do what I told you not to do if you don't want to get hurt. If you don't want your body to be hurt. If you don't want me to spank you. If you don't want me to whoop you, just do right. Right? But in reality, it's so much deeper than that. It's so much deeper because then we're producing fake children, right? Children who know how to play the part in the faces of the adults. But then once that adult figure is not around, once the person that can get them in trouble is not around, or the person who could discipline them is not around, then that child will flip a script and they'll become who they really want to be. And that's bad, right? And so, gentle parenting and authoritative parenting allow for the child to think critically about their decisions. Gentle parenting, the term is off-putting because it suggests that, you're just really coddly and you're very much like the permissive parent, like I mentioned last week. But in reality, being gentle is not always comfortable, right? I got my hair done a couple of weeks ago, and even though I went in with my hair detangled and washed, and even though my hairstylist, she was very gentle and very sweet, it still hurts sometimes. I'm tender-headed. I've been tender-headed all my life, getting my hair done as a kid. I was one of those kids crying and screaming and all of that, and like it still hurt, like when she was doing my hair. And so gentle parenting is not parenting without discipline. Gentle parenting is just parenting with a discipline that is not painful physically. At least it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Making a child clean up after themselves after they just made a mess is not going to be comfortable to that child every single time. Another example with Ezra, I wanted to give him back pats for his nap time. And he didn't want to take a nap. He wanted to get up and run around. So I held him down. Like, you're going to take a nap. It's nap time. You don't get to run around and play because you need to go to sleep. If you don't, you're going to be cranky. Like, I know this about you. And he didn't want to go to sleep. He was fighting me. He was crying. I was keeping him down, patting his back. And eventually he kind of, surrendered, right? He went to sleep. Granted, the technician coming over to look at the AC woke him up. But ultimately, the method worked. And so I think gentle parenting and authoritative parenting definitely take creativity and they take a lot of patience, like I mentioned in the previous video. But yeah, tell me what you think. I don't present this information as like I'm this totally right person, right? I'm not an expert. I don't have my degree in any of this stuff. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a mental health family expert, right? I just really appreciate education and knowledge, and I appreciate the opportunity to take the generation to the next level. And so, if you think whooping is literal, comment below. Offer your support. Offer your scriptural support, your any studies that you've seen or done, your own observation, right? Cultural whatever that you value, and we can have a conversation about it, because ultimately every single kingdom parent and every single believing parent wants to do right by their children, and they want to raise their children up in the way that they must go, so that way they'll never depart from it. That's ultimately the goal of parenthood, and I think all of us are just trying to strive for that. So yeah. We're going to talk about more about parenthood next week. I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about yet, because I took time off and I kind of lost track of where I'm at with it. I think I want to get into the word. I think I want to get into like some biblical examples of parenthood. Talk about Jacob and his favoritism, right? We be reading the Bible and there's this idea that this entire book, everyone in the book is just this amazing person. But really, showing favoritism to your children is pretty messed up. And it definitely had its negative effects. And, even though God was able to use Jacob's favoritism for his favor and his glory, I don't think showing favoritism to your kids on purpose for the Lord's glory is anyone's actual mindset. But yeah, we can talk about that, and I'll probably discover more research about the whole rod thing, if it's literal, if it's figurative. And I can bring what I discovered to the next video. So until then, and hopefully my AC works so I can stop fanning myself. Although this fan is cute. I got it from Dollar Tree. So anyway, I will see you guys in the next video.